Linda White, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. So it's really awesome to get you on here and talk about what you're doing. For a lot of people in my audience, they probably have no idea about the industry you're in and what you do, as far as like trapping animals and, the commercial industry of that side of things, and then everything else you have going on. So let's jump right into it.
All right. Sounds good. So you're right. There's probably a lot of people who, it's funny because I go to conventions and I go to hunting conventions and trapping conventions. And there's a lot of people who have said to me, oh, I didn't even realize that trapping was still a thing, or they look at the movies and they see like these big, horrible, like big traps, and they're, like all of that is so not even close to what we do. So it's interesting, like this day and age, how many people don't know anything about the sport itself, So yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. So what do you want to know?
Well, I mean, how did you get into this? Like, first off, where are you from? Where are you located right now? And, how did you get into doing this?
Yeah, so I'm in Little Valley, New York. I'm about an hour south of Buffalo. And it's funny, I tell people I'm from New York and they all think New York City, first of all. And second of all, they think that there's absolutely no trees in New York. And they're like, where do you do this at? So I'm here to tell you that I live on 71 acres of land and it's mostly trees. So there are trees in New York. And how I got into this, it's actually kind of crazy because I'm a city girl. Like, I was born in Pittsburgh, moved all around. My parents, they worked for the government. So I moved all around. I was in Erie, Pennsylvania, living in a townhouse when I met my now husband. And he told me, he's like, we were on a date and he's like, listen, I got to tell you something. And I'm like, all right. And you know how you're always like waiting for the other shoe to fall. You're like, all right, like he's a criminal or something crazy. And no, he's like, well, I'm a fisherman, I'm a trapper, and I'm a hunter. So if you've got any problems with that, we really need to address them now. And like fishing, my dad fished. I fished as a kid with my dad. It was no big deal. I lived on Lake Erie, so, fishing wasn't really bad. When I was 12 years old, I told my dad that I wanted to go hunting with him because my dad was like a hobby hunter, So I was like, I want to go hunting with you. And he said, okay, but we were going to hunt for squirrels first to see if this was my thing. And so my dad took me squirrel hunting. I shot a squirrel, first shot, right on, killed the squirrel. So excited. My dad's like, my daughter is awesome. I run over to the squirrel and I bawled my eyes out and didn't bury it in the backyard. So he was like, all right, babe, the hunting thing's not for you. But trapping, honestly, I never even knew what he was talking about. So when he told me that he was a trapper, I was thinking like mice and like rats. like no joke. That's how ignorant I was about it. I was thinking like mice and rats, and I'm like, okay, dude, if that's your thing, whatever. Yeah. But like I said, so I was living in a city right then. And I went back and I told my best friend, who was like super liberal at the time. And she literally showed me every like anti-horror story that is out there. Like, oh my gosh. And the thing is like in any industry, if you want to find like all the anti-bad stuff about it, you can.
Yeah,
I mean, it's out there,
sure.
So, and most of it's not true, but whatever. So yeah, I literally, like, she made me watch every video. I saw the propaganda, and honestly, I was like, this guy doesn't seem like a serial killer, because that's how it made it sound out to be, like, I mean, it was awful. So I said to him, I'm like, all right, I want to go with you. And it was funny. You should have saw his face. His face was like, really? Like, are you sure? Because like I said, I was a city girl. My attire, pretty much was like heels, boots, nice pair of jeans. Like, I was not country in any way. So, he's like, okay. I borrowed his daughter's boots and we went out, and the passion he had was like almost like intoxicating, have you ever met somebody and they're so excited about something that like you get excited too?
Yeah,
and
it
you're like,
sucks
I have
you
no
in.
clue why I'm excited. Yeah,
it just sucks you in.
I got no clue why I'm excited, but let's do it, so that's how it was with him. And it was little by little. And I learned, he told me like what trapping really is, like why we're doing it. What's the whole deal behind everything? I mean, he went into like any questions I had, he answered, and it was just awesome. And to see how all that propaganda that was out there, like didn't align with anything that, I was even witnessing firsthand was huge for me. So that's kind of how I got into everything. And it just snowballed. Like if you would have asked my family like 10 years ago, if this would have been me, they would have laughed. And it's funny because my sister-in-law still says to my husband, every like family event, she must really love you.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean that's crazy to have something to meet someone that and absorb their passion and then make your something out of it for your own. My biggest thing is like we have a lot of listeners and people and I've spent most of my life growing up hunting. I know absolutely nothing about trapping. I have trapped a few coyotes just to get them off of our lease where we were hunting back when we were younger. But other than that, I have done absolutely no trapping, and it's such a huge, it's a whole nother piece of, the puzzle, like, for outdoor activity. And there's I'm just excited to talk about it because like, honestly, I absolutely know nothing about it other than, the few animals so what all do you trap?
So, my husband and I pretty much go from anything to like your let's see, nuisance animals that you would have. Like we own a nuisance business as well now. So like even like your squirrels, all of that, like okay. we do that, as well. But I mean, we go all the way up to coyotes, your predators, we do water trapping. I mean, we've pretty much got it all. And that's the thing, like, so as a hunter, I always explain to people, trappers are kind of like the garbage men of the woods. Like we pick up your trash, because like as a hunter, you walk in and you like, oh, I got all these great deer and, turkeys and all of this is flourishing for you guys. But without having, predator control and without having like those nest raiders and all of that taken care of, as hunters, you don't have those luxuries that the trappers are kind of taking care of for you.
Right.
And it really goes hand in hand. And I always think it's funny because, the outdoor community as a whole, they kind of all stay in their lane.
Yeah.
If you ever, you've got some people who like will cross over. I kind of do everything, but for the most part, everybody stays in their lane. So like you've got your anglers over here and they don't care what the hunters are doing. Yeah. And you got the hunters over here and don't care what the trappers are doing, but they all really coincide. Like they all really mix really well. And a lot of people don't realize that. No.
Yeah. I mean, they really do. Like, so for example, just for people who have no idea what you're talking about, like, so can you give some examples of what you do trap? Well, let me bring this up first. So we have like really bad problem with hogs here, right? So they're a nuisance and they tear up, and that's a larger animal, but there's a lot of trapping going on here. I'm in Louisiana. That happens a lot. And then also in Texas, it's huge, because they're just such a nuisance. And also beavers. We have a problem with beavers damming up, waterways, natural creeks and stuff like that. So those are what I've seen, trapped here. But just for people who are listening and have no idea about this, what are some examples of animals, exactly, what are you trapping and why? And, are you for commercialized use, like maybe are you selling pelts and then others for, specifically, are you just, getting them off for hunters' land or people's land or whatever it may be?
So we do a lot of beaver work where we are, you've got the flooding and all of that. And it's funny because you have some landowners who are like, oh, I like watching the beaver. They're a magnificent animal. They really are. I mean, when you look at how they can take this tiny little stream and they build these big huts and these dams, I mean, they're really a magnificent animal. Unfortunately, they cause a lot of damage, and they can go from that small little stream to, the size of Lake Erie really darn quick. So, I mean, it can be pretty bad. So we do take care of, trapping out nuisance beaver for farmers, and even landowners, just homeowners in the area. And that's what I guess people don't understand is like how fast that can really get destructive. And I mean, you can wipe out a whole year's of crop, from some of our farmers. They thousands and thousands of dollars can be lost, and then but if we trap it on a nuisance permit and it's in season, we are able to use all of the animal, and we own a bait and lure business as well. So none of that animal goes to waste. We use the casters, you sell the tails, you sell the pelts, even the meat itself, we can use it in baits and lures. And there's some people who even eat beaver meat.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah. So that's another thing, like people sometimes think like us trappers, we're killing to kill, I guess, and that's not true. So many of us use as pretty much everything of the animal, and then, we do fox coyotes. They can kind of really be a problem, especially around more of your, condensed areas, like you've got them in your neighborhoods and all of that, and they're attacking little dogs and all of, those problems. So, we take care of those animals as well. And we're using, glands, the pelts, feet, all of that, everything is pretty much used as much as possible. Because it's not just about making money off of the pelt. I mean, right now the fur market is nothing. Like,
I would assume so. I don't
really know fur market.
Yeah, I would assume so. I'm not, I don't know much about the fur market, but there's not any here, as far as I know.
Yeah, COVID really put a hurt on that, because a lot of the fur that's being sold gets shipped over to Russia and so on. And with COVID, cutting down on shipping and our foreign relations and everything, that's really put a hurt on the fur market. And so in turn, like when the fur market goes down, there are a lot less trappers that are out there, because there are hobby trappers who are out there, that are just doing it for the fur or having fun with their kids or whatnot. And it becomes more of a cost than you get back. You have fuel prices have gone up and all of that. So that can be a real hindrance, to your hobby trapper. So you probably noticed as a hunter, like bag limits on waterfowl and all of that have gone way, way down.
Yeah.
And that has a lot to do with the fur market. There's less trappers out there. So there's more nest raiders that are now available, because we're not trapping them, that are now attacking your waterfowl.
Makes sense. Okay.
There's less waterfowl.
Okay.
It all goes hand in hand. It's really interesting. I wrote an article a while back on how the fur market can dictate so much in the outdoors, as far as like waterfowl, even like your does that you see out there, the bucks, all of that. Like it really can dictate so much how there's a ripple effect of everything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's something too that I definitely want to bring up, because there's going to be that person out there. I did see someone comment on the post that, I made before we announced this, giving you praise for actually, doing this as a business and not a hobby, and that you utilizing all the animal. But there's so many in these industries, there's always so many people that are, animal rights activists, whatever it may be, and, are super against all of what's going on. And can you just, break it down for people who may not understand what's the purpose of this, other than, what we talked about, but what's your purpose of it? And, what do you tell people whenever they try to attack you or say negative things about what you're doing?
So everybody wants to protect the animals,
Right.
that's the big PETA thing, like protect the animals. And it's always funny because when you get those comments, they're like, they're very negative to me. They're,
Right.
I hope you die. I hope you this. And I'm thinking like, wait a minute, you want to protect the animals, but you don't care about my life. So
Right.
I think that's kind of backwards. But, so the thing is we're the problem as humans. I mean, honestly, for the animals, we're the problem, but not the way most people think. We're the problem because we took over.
Yeah.
Before we were here, the animals were running free and everything was great. But as we have encroached on their space, that's where we need to, as humans, do them a service by taking care of predator control, taking care of population control, taking care of all of these things, because what happens if we don't? So if there was no trapping, say that there was absolutely no trapping at all, you weren't allowed to do it, you're going to have things like the destruction of beavers. Okay, so if we can't trap beavers, think of how many farmers would now not have crops, that their lands would be flooded. Think about all the disease that would run through, because like distemperament, you've got mange, things along those lines. Like Mother Nature will take care of things. It will. And Mother Nature is much, much crueler than any human would be.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, because what happens is, so just think of, like, for instance, COVID. Okay. When in New York City, when COVID hit in New York City, it spread like wildfire, like it was everywhere. Well, the same thing happens if you have an overpopulation of animals. So you get one coyote that comes in with mange, into a pack. Sooner or later, the whole pack has it. And what it's doing, it's losing its fur, that you've got starvation, all of those things. So, I mean, it's the same idea, but I don't think people connect the dots, like that what happens as a society of humans happens to animals as well. And because we've taken over so much, it needs to be controlled even more.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, that's a huge thing. And it is sometimes it's better to put that in perspective for people to understand, like population control. Like, for example, Colorado's been working on I think they may have passed that bill this year. I'm not too up to date on their laws, but like reintroducing wolves back into the wild because the deer population has grown so much. Like the mule deer, like when you go up there to visit in these towns like, Boulder and Colorado City and, outside of Denver, those areas, you see these deer in these people's yards and you see there's just way too much population. Mm-hmm. So they've had to, they've been trying to preserve that predator, the wolf, in that area, and then releasing it back into that area for population control. So it goes hand in hand. And a lot of people don't understand that now that this is something that we're living with, and, we're coexisting with these animals. You use them for food, we use them for, supplies, whatever it may be, for shipping, like for furs, whatever, that we have to regulate and control these populations to be able to keep having these animals for the rest of our lives.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. And, the thing is though, is with that, where they're introducing, wolves and coyotes and things back into the population, eventually that's going to be an issue then.
Right. It's just
causing one problem for another.
It's back and forth.
Yeah.
But
and unfortunately, like Colorado, they've limited trapping in Colorado. So what's going to happen now is if they introduce these coyotes or wolves back, into Colorado, eventually you're going to have an issue with them, and because of their trapping laws, they're really going to have a problem.
And then you're going to have to adjust those. You're going to have to adjust those to supplement that. It's just like it's a cause and effect thing that's going to be, something that's constantly back and forth. But, people just seem to, like, so as a human race, without any type of us consuming any type of animal, we never would have gotten this far, right? You know, like, being a vegan or vegetarian wasn't an option, and multiple, think about if you're in, in a cold climate, like where you're at or even further north, there's no vegetation in the winter. How are you going to survive? Like these things are, we have to have it as a human race, these are something we have to consume. So I just always I hate getting in a battle and arguing with people about these things, but there's always going to be those type of people, but we need these animals, no matter what it is, if we're, we're actually consuming them or for, purposes like what you're doing, we need them.
Yeah. And I think honestly, if this last year and a half, 2 years have taught you nothing, it's that there's so many people out there that don't have survival skills.
Yeah.
What's going to happen if these ports totally shut down? What's going to happen if, World War III happens? Because right now, I mean, we're kind of on the verge of that. What happens and we have no more technology, or we can't get shipments in, what are you going to do? And there's so many people out there, I feel like, that don't have the survival skills, and hunting, trapping, quite honestly, and even gardening and all of that.
Yeah, all those things.
Those are things. Yeah, those are important for us to teach our kids, to teach even ourselves. Those that maybe live in a big city or whatnot. You got to figure out a different way to just in case. And that's one of the big things, with trapping. I know, I can get food. I can make my clothing. I can, there's so much that I can do because of it. Even soap is made from animals. And that's what people don't think of those things. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so we're talking about that and, raising awareness and, teaching people those things. So you have Trapping Girl Incorporated. So let's talk a little bit about that and what you do there.
Okay. Yeah. So, when I got into trapping, my husband, we were just kind of hobby trappers back then. And he had trapped all his life, I think since he was 9. And we started a bait and lure business. And he had been making his own baits and lures.
And for those who may not understand, we're not talking about fishing bait and lures. We're talking about something to attract predators or other type of So just want to clarify that, because at first glance, if you're in a demographic like I am, that might be what you think immediately is going to fishing.
Right? Yeah. That's true. They're probably well, what does that have to do with trapping?
Yeah. Exactly.
They're different. They're different scents. They're things that would attract an animal. So we started that and ended up going to a lot of conventions and talking to people. And I had seen that, first of all, anybody who looks at the trapping community, the average age is probably about 55, 60. That's the average age. So there's not a lot of younger people who were there. There are very, very, very few women. And so when I started running my own line and doing my own thing, there was really nothing for me. That I am not like most men. I'm very smaller. I'm weak. I hate to say it that way, but I am. I'm not just swinging a 10-pound hammer or lugging 80 pounds worth of junk with me. It's just not happening. And so when I first decided I was going to go and run my own line, my husband did. He packed this bag of all of the stuff that he had on his line. I got to my first set. It was a 50-pound bag. I was like, this is stupid. I'm going home. It was too much. And then it kind of dawned on me. I'm like, maybe this is why women don't do this. Yeah. So I was so I started Trapping Girl because I thought, there's got to be an easier way for women, and there's got to be a way that it's not discouraging, because that was discouraging. So we have lighter weight tools, lighter weight equipment. And I opened it up to, I thought it was just going to be a business. It's now become this community, and it's kind of amazing how many women have reached out to me and have said, if it wasn't for you, I probably wouldn't have given this a try. because I am not your typical, I guess, what you think of as a trapper. Like, my hair is curled, I wear makeup, I have all my teeth, like you know. Well, you think of like mountain men, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you do.
That's the thing, you know. You think of mountain men, or I've like got to be like have the wonky eye or something. I mean, I don't have any of that thing. So that's the thing. It kind of opened up that to other women that, hey, we can do this. And so as I started talking to more and more women, I said, I need to start promoting women in trapping.
Yeah.
Applaud other women who are out there. And I do that. So I showcase a lot of women that are out there trapping, talking about, some of the struggles that we have as women in the trapping community, because we do. I have tiny little, my 12-year-old has bigger hands than I do. So I have tiny little hands. And if you've ever seen a trap, to have to push it down, I can, but the spread of a jaw, I can't get my hands around to set an actual foothold. Mm. So I need setters. I need extra equipment to do that. And that's kind of what Trapping Girl is all about, trying to provide women with that, but then also promote women in trapping, make them feel that, it doesn't matter what level you're at, what skill set you've got, how big or how small you are, what your age is. This is something you can do. And these are skills that you need, you know, and there's a lot of single parents that we have out there these days, unfortunately, I think it's like over half of the population is gone through a divorce, and there's a single parent out there. So trapping, like I said, when I first started, it was like the average age was like 55, 60. And that's an issue. That's a problem. If we're not bringing kids in, if we're not bringing, other people in, it's going to die. It really is. But I found that there was a lot of women out there who was that single mom who maybe their child wanted to start trapping, but mom had no clue. And she was kind of like, I can't do this. And that was one of my focuses, hey, I need to talk to those women, tell them, if the city townhouse girl can do it, you can too, and that was a big thing. So I started Trapping Girl, started the community. I now, I write for the American Trapper, which is the National Trappers Association, their magazine. It goes out to all of them. I write a column called The She Side. I have that in there, which highlights women in trapping. That's the whole purpose of it, is to highlight women in trapping. So it's really just, it's gone from this small little business to writing articles. I have a podcast now. I just started it. I don't know if you realize that. Well,
let's plug it. What is it?
It's Into the Woods with Trapping Girl. We're literally on the third episode of this, so it's brand freaking new.
Awesome.
But so and it's just women in trapping. Like I said, I write for the She Side. I have been doing the Alaskan Trappers Association. We're getting a women's group.
Awesome.
That so a summit in March. If anybody wants to go to Alaska,
are you in contact with Tana Grinda up there in Alaska?
No.
I gotta hook you guys up. So sorry to interrupt you. I get excited. Well, I get excited about these things because I have had multiple, guests on, like Lindsay Persico. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her. She's from Montana, but
name sounds familiar.
She's the one who won Alone the Beast in the Arctic of Canada. Out of 4 men and her, she was the last one left there in 30 days without any tools. They basically dropped a moose carcass in the Arctic and left, I think it was 3 or 4 people there. And it was her and then a few other men, and see how long they can make it. And they literally had no knives, no nothing. She had to, wow. They might have had one knife. I can't remember. She literally had to take the pelt off the moose with the rock and build a fire, all primitive style things. And I saw her story and I was like, holy shit, I got to get her on the podcast. And then it trickled into, she does a lot of outdoor fitness, preparing women who may want to, and men who may want to get into, types of hunting, and all the things that have to go into it, especially if you're going up into the mountains and getting in shape. And then, so she's affiliated with Tana Grinda. Tana's actually in Alaska, and I had her on the show as well.
Oh.
Her and her husband live there, and they literally fly in planes to different places and kill these huge moose and things. And so that community, I definitely want to get you connected with them because they're awesome. But I get excited about, just like you brought up earlier in the trapping industry, same thing with the hunting industry. It's evolved a little, earlier than what yours has, but, women are just now getting into these industries, in these hobbies, because they're, for so long, it was frowned upon for a woman to, hunt or fish, or trap, and so it's exciting to see the evolution of these outdoor activities, Well,
I think a lot of it too, and this is just totally my perspective. I think as families now are split.
Yeah.
I think that has something to do with it as well. When I was a kid, my mom was home taking care of everything while my dad went out, fishing or whatnot. And she was, taking care of the house or the kids or whatnot. And now, like, I feel that with these split families, you'll have Johnny who comes home and he's like, Mom, I want to go fishing. And so she's like, all right, well, I guess I'm going to take you fishing, so I think that has kind of started stuff. And then when they go out, they're like, hey, I like this. This is pretty cool. Instead of book club, let's have a fishing club,
Well, I mean, not only that, it's great to get outside and do things and be active, and not, no matter what, whatever, male or female, no matter what you're doing, to get these, people started at a younger age and get them involved in things like this, because there's so many people that have so much anxiety because they're locked inside all the time and don't, have a connection with the outdoors or connection with other people. So, you have a community, you're developing one, and it's just exciting.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so much fun, like, especially whenever you have like the little girl who's 5 years old and mom sends you like a picture and she's like, hey, look what she did. And it's just like the face, like the smile, that's all you see is just like, it's so nice. It's so awesome to, and I think the other thing, like, people need to realize, like, with getting these kids and doing all these activities, nobody who's out there trying to get them involved expects these kids to, be long line trappers. It might not be something that they do all their life, but now at least they know what it's about. So they're not going to be an anti. Like, that's a big thing people need to realize, like educating yourself on what's really out there, what's really going on. Like, these animals, first of all, are not Disney animals. I think that's always so funny. Like, when people are like, oh my gosh, you killed that. And I'm like, yeah, I did. Because it probably would have ripped my face off if I wouldn't have.
Exactly.
Like, it's not a Disney animal.
No.
And I think people need to realize, like, we have evolved so much. The big thing I always hear are, like, oh, that trap's going to rip their foot off and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, like, I am not in the business of trapping feet. Like, that's not what I want, you know? Like,
well, that's like, another thing I wanted to bring up before I forget to ask you this. So what type of traps do you use, just so people understand how this works? Because I know you assuming the clawfoot trap, but are there any other types you guys use for certain animals?
So I use a foothold, and I use a Bridger 2 dogless, which, if anybody ever wants to Google it, I use the modified one, which is an extra lamination on top of the steel. There are no teeth. So first of all, like, people always think of traps and they think it's like these teeth or whatever. There's no teeth. There's absolutely no teeth. And the reason I laminate the trap is because, just like anything, the bigger surface area you have of something, the easier it is on the animal. So
right. Yeah.
That's, like think about, like, if something like pinches you, if it's tiny, it's all pinpointed right there. You're like, ow, that kind of hurts. So the biggest surface animal, it's no different than like a pair of handcuffs. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to lie. Just like, as soon as their foot hit there, I mean, I've put my hand in a trap. It stings because it's the shock of something hitting. But then, I can wiggle my fingers around, everything like that. There's no issues. There's no problem. So that's one thing that people need to realize. We use those. I use cage traps as well. I use, which is just what it sounds like, a cage, and they come in different sizes. I use a conibear trap, which is a kill trap. Okay. So that's something that people should know. For like beaver trapping, we use a 330, and it looks just like a square. There's two, I guess you want to call it like, there's two metal levers on each side, and it just comes down. It just looks like a square box, and it kills them instantly. So that's something for like beavers and whatnot that you have. I use what's called a dog-proof trap, which is just a tiny little cylinder, and that's mainly used for coons.
Yeah.
And they put their paw in. It's kind of like a pull trigger, and it just holds them right there.
Yeah, I've seen
and
those.
The reason that they call it, and the reason they call it a dog-proof is so dogs, animals like that, they wouldn't be able to stick, their foot in there. And it's important for people, I think, to know, other than your conibears, I can release any of those animals, and they can go right back into the wild. I think some people think like, oh, well, they're in that trap and they're automatically going to be killed, or they need to be killed. It is about population control. I trap for nuisance, but I also trap for fun too,
right.
So when I go into an area, and let's say fox, for instance, it's a heavy populated fox area, and I'm using that foothold that I have. If I go in and it's, male, and then all of a sudden we catch a female, that female will be let go.
Right.
Because obviously there's a population that, a heavy population of males there, but then we do need to kind of keep putting back. There's not a heavy population of females there. We're not trapping to eradicate the animal. We're trapping to help control the animal. So that's important for people to realize. And
yeah, I mean, that's why, I want to definitely bring that up, because that seems to be the best way to explain to people who may immediately have some type of, resistance to something like this. Is like, look, you need to learn, why we're doing these things, of course, no matter what the rhyme or reason is behind it, it all boils down to, especially that, something like, controlling the population, making the species continue on for decades,
right.
centuries. I have trapped coyote and it chews its own foot off before. I'm sure you have too. I don't know if you've had that or not, but it's happened to me.
And normally, like, if there's an instance where something like that happens, there's something with the trap that went wrong.
Okay.
So for that instance, like, your swivels might have been clogged up. There might have been stuff that was like those things happen, and they put more tension on the foot.
Got you.
So,
I was inexperienced, but I was trying to trap them, as a nuisance control, because there was just so many, and I was catching like 2 or 3 a day, to go check this trap. And I think I left this one out there for 6 or 8 hours, and I went and checked it. And it was funny because and it's not funny, but I come over the hill of the pipeline that I was coming off of, and I could see him. Like, the one before this, I could see him jumping up like in the air where the trap was hooked, he's freaking out. And then, but I did have one to where I got there and there was a foot laying there and the trap was empty. I was like, damn, okay.
Yeah. Well, so sometimes, like I said, what happens is normally there's a swivel or something that like we all have those safety precautions that are in there, but every now and then something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Like nothing's 100% foolproof. So that's probably most likely what happened there. And it does. I hate to say it, but it happens just like anything, like every now and then you've got that crap. This went wrong, but 9 times out of 10, that's not the goal.
So, let's talk about your lure company a little bit. So, how does that work as far as, taking those different types of glands and, whatever it may be from the animal and then using them to attract other animals? How does that process work?
So, I mean, think about it as like your dog. Like whenever your dog meets another dog, they're always sniffing butts and everything like that. Animals out there are the exact same way. So when you're trapping, I mean, you got to think like if you're in a field you've got to get this one animal who has this whole entire field to walk across in this little spot, like, and those pans are not very big, depending on what kind. I mean, like, you're dealing with just that, like, it's not very big. So we have Sawmill Creek baits and lures, and it's just using other byproducts from the animal, just different, like I said, the beaver, we use a lot of meat, we use a lot of glands, different scents from the animal, and every animal is kind of attracted to different things. Like beaver. So beaver are a very territorial animal. I don't know if you know that.
I did not know that.
They're very territorial. Yeah. So every beaver, like their little colony, their little clan, they have what's called castor in the beaver. And like, you'll see mounds. If you ever walk along like the banks of where there is a beaver, you'll see these slides and you'll see these little mounds. Right. And it's a secretion from the beaver and that's them marking their territory. So when you go in and you're trapping and you use castor from a different beaver, and you stick it on there, that's where you're going to catch them. They're going to come back up there because they're like, hey, dude, you're in my area. And they want to get rid of that castor and put their own there. So like things like that attracts them to that area, that pulls them in. And that's why we do it. It helps with a lot of, we sell to a lot of other nuisance trappers that are out there and hobby trappers. We go to all over, really. I mean, gosh, we have been pretty much all over the United States at different conventions selling baits and lures, and we have a website as well. So
what do you use for some more examples? What do you use to lure coyotes?
So it depends on the type of year. If you're later in the year and they're looking to mate, you're going to want to use more of a gland, because you want that other coyote out there. Or if it's maybe where there's a lot of snow, the hunger factor, you're going to play on that. So you use a bait, something that they'd want to eat. Urines, different urines will attract them. You'll see. Have you ever gone out and you'll see like there's a rock and you've noticed, and even your dog will stop and pee on that rock. Yeah. Everything going through will pee on that rock. Well, that's a great place to put a set because like that coyote, it's a focal point. They're going to come up, they're going to pee on the rock, and then they're going to go, just marking their territory. So, I mean, things like that for a coyote, you've got your glands, you've got curiosity lures. So different scent smells that would bring them in, play on their different scents, play on their different times of the year. Like I said, you've got mating and starvation, later on, especially where I'm at, we've got like a foot of snow. Yeah. So, I mean, any way that they can find any kind of food, that's definitely something you want to play on.
When I did, and this was probably the last time I did that was probably 15 years ago. And there was no internet forums to look at really about these things. So I was like, I found the trails where they were crossing and just placed a few traps on those trails. And then I used like meat, and I just didn't know what else to do. It worked,
Right. Well, so right there, you played on their travel patterns.
Right.
Coyotes are like a lot of humans, they're going to take the path of least resistance. So if there's already a path there, they're going to go right down through. And then you also played on the hunger factor with that meat, so they already had that trail there. They were already traveling. And then the meat wise, hey, who doesn't want a free meal? Yeah. So that's how you got it there. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just interesting to me because like this is the whole, like we talked about at the beginning, it's just a whole nother world. And, anytime I can learn anything new that correlates to anything I'm interested in, it's just, it's cool to talk about these things, especially, there's probably a lot of my listeners and viewers that, are on I definitely know this, are on the angler side or the hunting side, but have no idea of this in between,
Right. And so like they even need to think of that. I always have these deer hunters who are like, well, yeah, you can trap my land, but I don't want you to disrupt my deer hunting. Like, I always think that's so funny. And I probably see more deer checking traps, than most of my deer hunters do.
Exactly. Like, because you're actually in the mix of walking trails, not going to a stand and waiting for them to walk to, corn or whatever it may be.
Right. Yeah. So we're not disrupting your deer hunting, but, they need to realize like we're helping that, for instance, like right behind my house, I literally took 7 fox right behind my house this last year. And I guess it was the year before. And this last like spring, like the bunnies, the turkeys that I have on my land.
That's what I was about to bring up. Like, why
so much growth?
Yeah, that was the next thing I was going to bring up is, we now know our beavers, we know our coyotes. We hadn't talked about foxes. So yeah, I mean, that's a huge, point right there is that, those other animals are now being able to be in those smaller animals are now able to be in those areas and not be disrupted.
Right. And they can live more coincide of each other instead of having that big population of fox and then there's no bunnies, and everything has its purpose. That's the thing, people are like, oh, well, you don't want to kill this or you don't want to kill that. It does have its purpose. They're not wrong. But if it's an abundance of it, it's causing an effect somewhere.
Right. There's a decrease in some other.
Really a point.
Yeah.
Right. That's really important. Really important for people to know.
That's awesome. Well,
what else you got for me?
I mean, hey, look, we could go on forever. We've talked about your awareness in trapping. We talked about, how you got into this. We also talked about the lures and, the baits you guys do. Anything else you're doing, that correlates to any of this in the community or anything else that you may want to bring up or plug?
Yeah. So, I write for the American Trapper. I think I said that. Yeah. We've got a couple different women's groups that I am kind of like heading. The one in Alaska I've got going on. There's one in July that it's a women's workshop. Next, December out in Nebraska, I'm actually inviting, women to come along and trap with a friend of mine. And we're going to go out and just any kind of questions, anything, come trap alongside of us or learn from us, however you want to do it. We're going to get like a big Airbnb. And I think that's like super important for people to realize, like, if you have questions about this, don't just go off what the internet says. There's so much like fake stuff out there. Like you can find anything. Like, it's so funny. I always tell people, like, take Coca-Cola, for instance. Okay. You can tell me all of the great things that Coke has done throughout the history of Coke. We used to use it as a medicine and everything. And then in the same article, you could turn around and find out how it's decaying your teeth and it's doing this and it's doing, so like that's one brand that is out there that you can find all the horrible things and all the great things on the internet. So I always tell people, like, come talk to a trapper, come talk to somebody who's actually doing it and go out with them. And that's kind of how this whole women's thing started, was that in Nebraska in December, as I was talking to a friend of mine and I said, I wonder how many women out there who want to try this and they don't know where to start and they don't know what to do. And they're just nervous, like, hey, I totally want to do this, but I'm a little nervous on how this is going to work. Come with us, come hang out with us. And that's, I guarantee, like, people don't realize how many trappers are out there. In the 2 counties that I trap, there's over 1,000 licenses that are sold in 2 counties.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of trappers that are out there. So if you have questions, get a hold of somebody. You can get on Facebook groups. You can call me. I'm pretty transparent.
Yeah, like, there's a huge community. Like I kept looking at social. I kept getting notifications. I was like, gosh, this girl knows a lot of people. Like, this is a whole community I didn't even know existed. Right? I knew that, when I stumbled upon you, I was like, oh, she's going to be awesome to have on the show when I need to talk to her. I didn't realize that there were so many of you guys, because it's just something that's not talked about on my side of the community, whatever it may be. And it's really awesome that there is so many people, that there are people that, like you, that people can find out more information about these things.
Yeah. And I really think that that's important, to reach out. And even if you've kind of been on the other side of things, like that's something that I kind of, you had said earlier about, what do you do if you have an anti who's attacking you? a couple years ago, I was PETA's poster child for like 2 months. Like, no joke. They had this group. They pinned me to the top of the group. I had death. Oh my gosh. I didn't even know that many people even like hated me until then. It was awful. I mean, I had death threats. They were calling my kids. I mean, it was really bad. But out of that, I have a woman who I still talk to now who messaged me, and she was in this group. So this was, she was against what I was doing, and she messaged me and we had a conversation. And even to this day on Instagram, she likes my stuff and she's like, "Oh, that looked like a good one, Linda. Yeah. Good job." Because she heard all of the stuff that went wrong, and just myself, if I would have listened to my friend at the very beginning of this and looked at all of that stuff that was on PETA, I would not be where I am today. I would not be sitting here. I could have blindly followed all of that and thought, oh, my husband was a serial killer and I'm not going to, I could have believed all that. And taking that small little time and saying, "Hey, I want to see what this is about." It was really an afternoon that changed everything for me. I
mean, that's the biggest issue in what we're dealing with and across the board, right? It's not taking the time to have a conversation, to educate yourself, just completely jumping on one side or the other and fighting against each other. I mean, that's the biggest problem we have across the board with all types of things, currently in our lives. But I mean, yes, you take the time to educate yourself or reach out to someone who has multiple perspectives and get there, have a conversation, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is you don't have to agree with them.
No.
But you need to be able to be open-minded enough to see their side of the line, stop just saying, drawing that line in the sand and saying, "Oh, they're wrong. It's like anything. Are there bad people that are out there? Are there bad trappers? There are. Are there, but there's bad things in anything, but that doesn't mean trapping is bad, and so really know what's going on with the sport itself, I think is huge.
I agree. Any last thoughts, anything you want to mention to anyone, as far as who may be interested in getting into this, activity outdoors?
So I would say if this is something that you would like to know more about, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about trapping, pretty much every state and almost every county has a trappers association. So you can reach out to you just Google whatever state you're in, like New York Trappers Association or even the counties. And that's a good place to start. Go to meetings, reach out. They can get you in touch with a trapper. Or you can always message me. Like, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm pretty much everywhere. And I'm pretty transparent. So like, you got questions. And even if, like I said, you're on the fence, like, "Hey, I need to know a little bit more about this or whatnot, But that's, I think, the big thing, reach out to these different organizations, reach out to the different people, don't be scared to learn more about something. Even if you're like, I don't know if I really want to do this, but I just want to learn more about what she's talking about. Mm-hmm. I think that's super, super important.
Yeah. Well, hey, I learned a lot today. I'm excited. And I'm sure everyone else did.
Yeah, and hey, and if you have any more questions, let me know.
I'm full of questions. I'll definitely ask you if I have one. Well, it was an awesome time today with you. Let's wrap it up. Had a great time.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
The Trapping Girl on Instagram, Linda White. Thanks everyone for tuning in.